Everybody, thank you so much for picking this session. I realize that in the world of Product Camp, you have so many great sessions that you can choose from that it makes the morning full of, oh, which room should I go to? So hopefully we're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about what I call uncommon connections, how to build trust while you're networking. So I just want to kick off. I didn't put in the sponsor slide because I forgot, but I know at Product Camp, the one thing we always want to do when we start one of these sessions is thank the sponsors, because Product Camp couldn't happen without them. So imagine for just a minute that there was a slide with lots of logos and support all of those sponsors who would show up on that logo. So let's get going. So what is an uncommon connection? Well, let me flip it around and start with what I learned during the pandemic. And that was that people matter more than ever. We all got asked to go home, to socially distance, and to be away from the normal things that we did, going to the office, hanging out with friends and family, going to happy hour with coworkers, attending things on the weekend like Product Camp. All of that was ripped away last March. And many of us realized that, wow, I really miss a lot of those key people. But we also realized that there were probably some people that we didn't miss as much, that our connection with them was just average. And we have more average connections in the world now because of social media than we've ever had before. I talk to people all the time who tell me how many LinkedIn connections they have. One person was doing some work and he was trying to sell me. He wanted to do marketing for me as a speaker. And he kept telling me that in the last year, he'd added 4,000 LinkedIn connections. And so I started snooping around, and when he'd make a post, he'd get 1 like, 3 likes. So did it really matter that he had 8,000 and that 4 of them had been added in the previous year? No. In fact, many of those I wouldn't even call average connections. Many of them were just a like, a link, a share, and a follow. But during the pandemic, my business as a speaker, I mean, I've made my living going into companies and doing team training and speaking at association meetings for over a decade. My business went from a pretty successful little speaking business to 0 in the course of about 3 days in March last year. And that was a really tough thing to deal with. And what I realized throughout the course of the next year is there were a small handful of people in my industry, in other industries, prospects, clients. There was a small number of people who had my back, who went out of their way to make sure their company hired me to speak at a virtual event or training they were doing, to use me as a master of ceremonies for an online thing. And what I realized was these people who went out of their way to help were rare. Now, I'm not saying it was everybody else's job to help me. I also looked at who was I willing to go out of my way to help and serve and refer during this crazy stay-at-home pandemic year that we had. And I realized that all of us have a very small number of connections where we totally have their back, they have our back, and it's uncommon. And so I started looking at everything I've taught over the last decade, and I thought, what is it about connections that lead to that level where they become that uncommon connection who are really looking to help us? And I started looking around at different things, and I ran across a friend of mine's company. I've known him for a long time, but I started delving deep into the 20 years of research that he's done around trust in business. And what I realized was those connections where we really had that bond, where we were there to help each other no matter what was going on, that uncommon connection, I realized that there was really high trust. And so I started to think about the networking skills that I teach. And I realized, and many of you have seen me speak before, I realized that I always talk about that people do business and give opportunities to people who they know, they like, and they trust. Now, I'm not the first person to say that. You've heard that many, many times throughout your career. It's a little bit of a cliche. People do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. Well, what I have spent over a decade teaching people was a lot around how to get to know each other, how to be visible, how to grow that personal brand, how to be a contributor in the community. And along the way, like would come along, or it wouldn't, because here's a little secret. Don't tell your mother this. Not everybody's going to like you. And it's okay. And the other part of that is you're not going to like everybody. And so I spent a lot of what I was teaching focused around know and like. And then I talked about trust, but I didn't really back it up until I started really going into this research from the Trust Edge Institute. And so now what I'm going to talk to you about today is how do you build trust while networking? Because when you get to a super high level of trust, that's where the magic happens. They've actually done surveys on companies and individuals. People who score high in assessments around how well they're trusted and how well they build trust with people. People and companies who score high will be up to 183% more successful financially than those who score average. And you can imagine that the inverse is then for those who score low in trust. So as I think about how do you network, how do you build your career inside your company, with clients, with prospects, and with people who could be your future employers, you need to be very conscious around this whole idea of trust. But to get us started, I want to go back to some basics around networking. And that is that relationships are built through shared experiences. Think about that. For those of you who've been to a million product camps, it's great to go and see the speakers. It's fun to figure out who's going to be the highest rated speaker of the day, who's going to have that session that pulls everybody in and gets everybody excited. But here's the other part. Here's the other part that you have to think deeply about. And that is what happened in the hallways when we would be, at wherever the meeting would be, whether it was when it was at UT or when it was at Norris Conference Center or any of the other places. The real magic of Product Camp happened in the hallways. And hats off. I commend the volunteers at Product Camp for what they've done the last 2 sessions to take us into this virtual world. However, I'm going to just tell you that my observations over the course of the last year, my observations have shown that online networking for many people is not as good as standing around with a cup of coffee saying, so tell me what you thought about that. We go into these breakout rooms and they're awesome in this world where we have to be safe and socially distanced. But for most people, they like that serendipity of talking to 2 or 3 people. Who's going to sit next to you at lunch? Now, that's not to say that online networking isn't good. It's been great. Imagine for a minute if this pandemic had hit us in 1997. I know, Wayback Machine. Think about this. What was going on in 1997? Email was just becoming something that most companies were adopting. There were many people who still weren't using email constantly. Cell phones existed, but smartphones did not. And we didn't have any of the social media that we rely on today. The tools did not exist to be able to connect in a way. So had this pandemic happened 24 years ago, it would have been a nightmare. There would have been no way to connect and network. So I'm not dissing the digital, but I'm taking us back to that part where we can really share an experience. When you're sitting shoulder to shoulder next to somebody, watching a speaker like me up on the stage, and the speaker says something that you agree with, people can look at each other and go, oh yeah, that eye contact, that little smile, that little smirk, that's a shared experience. Or if the speaker says something you don't agree with, you look over like, who is he? A shared experience. It's a little harder to do in this environment. However, as the world opens up and we get back out there, we have to embrace these shared experiences more than we ever had before, because I think people, whether they're introverts or extroverts, I think people are hungry to really have those connections. So over the course of the last year, I was brought in digitally like this to a lot of companies to teach a class that I was calling, it was a little 1-hour interactive program that I put together to speak virtually called Social Tightening While Social Distancing. And I had basically 5 tips on that. And these work not only during the pandemic when we all had to be at home, but they work as we come back to this face-to-face world. And I want you to think about this, because are you doing these things? Number 1 is, are you reaching out to people? Yeah, you probably had touch-in calls with your boss and some coworkers, but unscheduled. Are you reaching out to your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers to find out how are they doing? Now think about in your own life. Some of you have had a lot of people who've reached out to you over the last year just to check in, make sure you're doing well, and letting you know they care. Some of you may have had less. And I will tell you that for those of you who had a lot of people who reached out, it makes you feel good. Why aren't you being that person who's reaching out and making other people know someone cares? Mental health problems have been at extreme highs over the last year. Ever since they've been recording such things, the numbers are higher of people who feel isolated, disconnected, and lonely. There's an epidemic of loneliness out there, and you can help stop it by just reaching out to the people who you care about. The second thing is make sure you're trying to add value to people. And value isn't just what you sell. It's not just what you do. The value I provide to people isn't just when I get hired to speak or when I get hired to do career coaching. The value that I can bring might be connecting other people. It might just be doing that reach out. It might be sharing an article. But when you provide value, people remember you more. Number three, use the tech tools that exist. Well, I am a big believer that face-to-face wins the day in most cases, not all. I also know that we have these wonderful tools that we're able to do. We're able to use the chat room and send messages to each other in a Zoom meeting like this, or we're able to text somebody in a back channel using Slack or direct message. Make sure that you're using the tech tools to keep your relationships alive while we're still being safe and as we break free into the world of face-to-face human connections. Number four, be creative. If you look just like everybody else, you're going to be invisible. So find ways to stand out and be creative. So many people have used video and other things. Something I started doing with a lot of my friends is when I would know it was their birthday because of Facebook or another social media, instead of just putting in their chat or in their stream, happy birthday. And sometimes it would just be a self-populated happy birthday. Instead, I would close out of Facebook, take out my phone, and I would film a little video where I would go, "Hey, Becky, I heard it's your birthday today." And then I would sing. And although my last name is Singer, you really don't want to hear me sing. It's not pretty. However, I would get people who'd write back and go, "Best birthday wish of the day." By being creative, I was able to stand out. And then the final tip I have in this whole idea of how do you socially tighten while we've had to socially distance, my final tip is be transparent. If you're a person who has struggled a little bit with this loneliness, when someone says, "How are you?" don't just say, "Fine." So often that's what people reply. And that doesn't lead us closer to trust. When people are faking it till they make it, it doesn't bond us together. Now, the flip side is you don't want to be Eeyore every time that you see somebody and be like, "Oh, it's been so hard. It's so horrible," and list all the things that suck. However, if you're having a rough time, it's okay to share with people that you're having a bit of a rough time. So as I said, I've become a certified partner with an organization called the Trust Edge Institute. They have done 20 years around trust and success in business. And I've gotten really excited about partnering with this company because it layers so well in to what I teach about human connection, your network, your long-term brand, and being able to uncover opportunities. So the framework that they have put together revolves around the 8 pillars of trust. And what I'm going to do is breeze through those right now and totally take them in a networking point of view. There is so much more in this research that goes so much deeper into company culture and into other areas around how you can succeed. But I'm going to take my own 2 cents around how do you do it? How do you network and build trust? So the first pillar is about clarity. And basically what the founder of the Trust Edge Institute says is that people distrust what is unclear. So you need to make sure that you let people know who you are and what you do. Clarity really makes a difference. When people understand who you are and what you do, it's so much easier for them to hire you, to refer you, etc. So people distrust the unclear. They also distrust the overcomplicated. So when you're going out to meet with people, think in advance. Who am I? Well, you're a super complicated human being, and your job, especially working around technology, your job can be super complicated. And maybe you've changed jobs, and maybe you have this really eclectic background. If you spend too much time telling everybody everything that you do, they're not going to know where to start. I advise people who are looking for jobs not to be a comma person. You know what a comma person is? In my world, it's someone who's a speaker, comma, a coach, comma, an author, comma, a podcaster, comma. Pick a lane and be clear about who you are and what you do, and it gives people a better chance to relate to you and to be able to connect with you. The second pillar is compassion. We often get so busy we forget that when we're involved in a networking relationship with another human being, on the other side of that relationship, there's a person who has their own stuff going on. And sometimes we are so caught up in, "Oh my gosh, I need a job," or we're so caught up in, "I need to sell them my product," or inside the company, we're like, "I want the promotion." We stop remembering that that other human being, that carbon-based life form on the other side, They have their own stuff going on in life. So be compassionate, be interested in those people, be curious about them. And remember that when people know you care, they're going to trust you more. So be compassionate about the people you are, that maybe they're busy, maybe they're overworked, maybe they're overwhelmed. Don't just make every interaction you have with another human all about yourself. The third pillar is around character. Now, many people in business would say, well, this goes without saying, but also think about your own life. You have worked with people in companies who didn't have great character. You worked with people who stole office supplies, or you worked with people who sniffed or cheated on their time card or whatever. What happens when that person comes back around into your life and your company is thinking of hiring them and they say, hey, Becky, I see that you used to work with Bob. If you know that Bob is of low character, are you going to tell your company, yeah, bring Bob in here? No. People are always watching, and character is something that is remembered. Now, we all can stumble along the way, but when you go forth and are a person of good character, over the course of your career, people are going to notice this. People are going to understand. So if you want to be able to build better relationships, number one, don't hang out with people of bad character. Because there's that old adage that was made famous by the famous speaker, Jim Rohn, that said that you, when it comes to your character, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with on a daily basis. So surround yourself with people of great character who do the right things, who can step up and make things happen. However, make sure that you're living by character, because people are watching. And if you stumble, fix it. And if you know that you're cutting corners, stop doing that, because that's going to become part of your brand. Character is so important when we talk about trust, that often trust and character get thought of as total synonyms. But character is something much more complicated and onto itself. So the fourth pillar is competency. So competency to me is, you got to do good work. If you want to build relationships in the business world that are going to lead to more opportunities for you, whether it's sales or getting put on the next project or getting hired or promoted, you got to be good at what you do. And competency is all about what we're talking about in this aspect around your job. So I might trust you to take my kids to the ball game because you're a super nice person. You love baseball, you love kids, but I'm not going to trust you to give me a root canal. Think about that for a minute. If you're not a dentist, do I want you to be the person who gives me a root canal? So you don't have to be competent in everything. But when it comes to your area of expertise at work, your competency, being great, developing a reputation for being known for doing good work, getting the job done, delivering things on time, when you're known that you have really high competency in your area of expertise, you're going to become that go-to person that people are going to want to go to. And everybody wants to have the experts in their network. So position yourself and do great work. The next pillar is commitment. And here's the thing. People like to be around people who are committed to doing things well. So it layers directly on top of competency is commitment. People want to be around people who show up all the time in networking groups that you might belong to around town. Once the world opens up again, one of the things is a lot of times people sign up, a name tag is printed, it's put over there on the table, and they don't show up. Well, yeah, we all get busy, things happen at work. However, over time, remember that people start scanning that name tag table and they see that you sign up for things a lot and don't show up. That doesn't help build your brand. Also, if you volunteer to be on a committee or a board and you get busy and you blow it off and you don't help, pull your weight on that committee, people in the future aren't going to be thinking that you're the person they want to give opportunities to, because they know that you don't follow through on your word. So being committed to showing up and doing what you say you're going to do helps bring you closer to people. All of these pillars are totally intertwined. And if you fail in any of them, you can undermine that trust. So you need to be looking at all 8 of them and trying to figure out, am I holding up that roof that is opportunities and career and my network by doing well in all of these things? The next pillar is my favorite one because I've been teaching connections for 12 years. The next one is connection. People want to be around people they feel connected to. And those shared experiences I talked about when I started this are what it all comes down to. People are connected when they've been around you several times. One of the biggest mistakes people make in networking is they think, oh, I showed up at Product Camp and I met Bobby and oh my gosh, we had a great conversation. They go home and they send Bobby a LinkedIn request and they think, ooh, we're connected. A like, a link, a share, or a follow in social media is not being part of your network. Meeting someone one time doesn't even make them part of your network, even if you link in with them. Meeting someone once makes them someone you have met once. And there is a huge difference between someone you've met once and someone who you have cultivated a long-term and mutually beneficial relationship with. We really get to connections through those shared experiences, and it takes time. It's kind of like dating. For those of you who are married, did you propose to your husband or wife the night you met them? Most people are going to say no. There's always that one person who goes, yes, we did. All right, whatever. The rest of us had to build a connection before we got to the point that we made that lifetime commitment with our spouse or our significant other. Same thing is true when it comes to networking. It takes time to build connections, and you're not going to be able to do it with everybody. So you need to be committed into making those connections work. The next pillar is contribution. People want to be around people who are raising the tide for all the boats, people who are contributing to make society better, people who are working to make the office culture better. If you're a person who is undermining other people, gossiping about people, or just sort of sitting back and letting everybody else do the work, it's not going to build that relationship. People aren't going to trust you if you're a skater. People trust people who contribute to the greater good and who always are showing up to make things happen. So this whole idea of contribution makes a huge difference. Think about it with the people who you hang out with. If you were to take a trip with 6 friends, there's going to be some, rented a big Airbnb. There's going to be somebody who wakes up in the morning and scrambles the eggs, cooks the bacon. What do you think about that person? Especially if they make the bacon the way you like the bacon. You're very, very thankful to it because they've contributed to the greater experience of everybody. Then somebody else is going to jump in and wash the dishes. Somebody else might go to the store and buy everything that you need to make a great lunch. But then there's going to be that one person who just sits on the couch with their cup of coffee and goes, yeah. Now, I have a friend who does that, yet she tells the best stories and is so entertaining. It's side-splitting laughter. That's her contribution. Everybody has to contribute to make the greater good go. And if you want to build trust, you have to be a doer. And the final one is consistency. I've been teaching networking skills for a long time, and people come up to me after these types of presentations, especially in live rooms, but even in things like that, people will send me messages afterwards and they'll be like, oh, I loved what you said. You put it in a way I've never thought of before. I can take that action item and go and do it. Thank you. Then I'll run into them later and they'll be like, yeah, it really didn't work for me. And I'll be like, why not? And they go, well, you know, I sent out a couple of emails. I followed up with a couple of people and nobody gave me any opportunities. Well, you cannot build a network in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. I think it takes 3 to 5 years to build the type of network, to have the types of shared experiences, to navigate the actions that raise trust to where you're going to have those opportunities happen, where you're going to create those uncommon connections. It can take a long time, and you have to do all of the things that we talked about today and a million others. You have to do them consistently. However, when you get around smart people, so those were the 8 pillars of trust. When you navigate those, that's great. Now pay attention to the people who you're drawn to, who you instantly feel that bond with, people who have a high trust factor with you. Here's the thing, ask them about their career. During the pandemic, I did something that changed my life. And that was, I decided that because I was in trouble, my business went to zero and I still had a mortgage to pay. I still had healthcare to figure out because my wife and I both work for ourselves. And for the record, you work for yourself. Healthcare sucks in this country, no matter what they say they've done. It's horrible. Sorry, healthcare people, but it is bad and it's expensive and I had to pay for it. And I have a daughter at an Ivy League college. And guess what? While a lot of companies who hired virtual speakers wanted to pay like 20% of a live presentation or 30%, the Ivy League wants full tuition. So I created a program for myself, and that was every single day, I made sure I talked to at least one smart person, people I admired, people I trusted, people I already had a strong relationship with or some sort of sideline connection to. And I told them, I'm trying to talk to one smart person a day, and I'm looking for ideas and advice. Now, success leaves clues. Smart people can't help it. They give you a nugget, an idea, a thought. Now, I'll be honest, not everybody gave me things I could act on or I wanted to act on. But over the course of a year, about 5 people gave me ideas that I turned in to ways to make money that have kept me afloat. It's kept the mortgage paid. It's kept that silly healthcare paid, and it's kept my daughter in college. It all comes from paying attention to people you know, you like, and you trust, and realizing that success leaves clues. So if you want to stand out from the crowd, you can't hide. You have to show up. You have to do these things. And you have to know that your network is important, but it doesn't happen by accident, because most of the people you're going to meet in a networking situation throughout your career, you're going to have average connections with. In fact, most of the people you're going to have less than average connections with. I challenge people to go look at their LinkedIn and go through your LinkedIn and ask yourself, if I was alone and had no plans for Thanksgiving, is there anyone in LinkedIn who would say, please come join my family for Thanksgiving dinner? That would be an uncommon connection, because not everybody in your list would do that. I'm connected to thousands of people in LinkedIn, most of which I've met directly. I kind of, for a long time, had this rule that for LinkedIn, I didn't connect to people I hadn't had a conversation with. There's some exceptions, but there's about 4,000 people in my LinkedIn. I've probably met 3,500 of them and had a cup of coffee, a meal, or a beer with them, or an extended conversation online or in person. And there are probably 8, maybe 12 who would invite me to join their family for Thanksgiving, because it's uncommon to get to that level with a business connection. However, when you do it, your life will change forever. All right, we've got a couple of minutes for questions and answers. You can unmute yourself. You can use the Q&A box, but according to my clock, we have 3.5 minutes. So I am here to answer anything that you got. And thank you, Kathy, who had said I am always welcome at her house for Thanksgiving. Questions, comments, thoughts? Unmute yourself.
I don't have any questions, but I wanted to say thank you for this content, because this is exactly where I need to grow. So thank you.
Nice. Well, I will tell you, if you look at a book called The Trust Edge by David Horsager, or his brand new book came out 2 weeks ago called Trusted Leader, both of those books go into depth around this whole concept of the 8-pillar framework around trust, and it's life-changing.
Awesome. Thank you.
I personally agree with Sarah that I have a lot of work to do in many of those areas, especially consistency. I've got compassion out the yin yang, but I'm not always very good with commitment. My husband says I overpromise and underdeliver. So
you want to do that the other way. And I'll tell you, there is if anybody wants to take it, you can reach out to me. There is an assessment around the 8 pillars. And as a certified Trust Edge partner, I have the ability to give this thing. I can let you take it, and it ranks you on where you are on the 8 pillars. And, you know, I was surprised to see where I was low, because I thought that's where I was going to be high. You know, I scored pretty well across all 8 in the trust scale, but I would say that it shows you kind of areas of where you can focus. So email me at tom@thomsinger.com if you want to take that assessment, and
okay.
I will set it up for you.
I think there would be no surprises there, but it would definitely confirm what I already know to be my, you know, my deficiencies.
Well, here's the thing I've learned in being a partner with this organization, this Trust Edge Institute. They say, and their research for 20 years backs it up, any problems we have in business or life, you can trace back to a trust issue. You have attrition of your employees, it's a trust issue. Having trouble recruiting people, it's a trust issue. Fighting with your husband or wife, it's a trust issue. So everything we do, we can look back, and there's an issue that when trust is low, everything starts to get undermined.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. It was a great presentation.